Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Zone Blitz. As always, I'm Vince Miller, joined by my co-host Ashton Overhaul. I'm excited for this one, Ashton. I hope you're excited too. The so-called college football offseason, we do lots of different episodes. This one is our annual college football program power rankings. I've been excited for it for a while. How psyched are you, Ashton, or is it just me?
No, this is going to be fun. I think we will have quite a bit of disagreement.
Yes.
Yeah, just from we're doing a power ranking of college football programs, and it's so subjective. And I am absolutely going to be making emotional decisions. Like, this is playing into it. The recent recruiting is 100% playing into this for me. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be fun. I think we should have some good arguments.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. There's so many different ways you can go with a list like this. And I know we think some of these things through a little differently, so that's one of the things I'm excited about. Before we just dive into the list, itself, Ashton, what were kind of the things you were valuing when going through the college football programs and where to rank them?
Yeah, I think trajectory does have something to a part to play in it, and a lot of that's in that. Yeah, trajectory is often indicated by recruiting rankings. So Texas A&M, I think I'm going to be a little bit higher on as a program than maybe I even should be, simply because they have so much talent there. You know what I'm saying? So I'm ranking these teams based on how likely they will be to have a really, really good year next year and the year after that. And you do have to take in past years into account, that is their trajectory, right? So that's kind of where I went to it. With it, it's a combination of coaching, stability, and then as well as recruiting. So kind of a mixture of those two things.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you kind of looked at a lot of the same things I did. Basically, I asked 6 questions about each team. All of them are kind of related. How good were they last year? How good have they been the last 5 years? How good does Vegas think they will be this year?
Right.
How talented is their roster? How well are they recruiting? And then how good is their head coach? And then I actually put together a little formula where I ranked all the teams in all these different areas and threw it all together. And then I went through and moved stuff around, just kind of the, you called it some of it emotional decision making, maybe. Yep. I think maybe some of it is just feel, quite frankly. Yes. A lot of it is just feel. I wanted to use a lot of the data to kind of look at all those different things, but then at the end you kind of move things around the way you want them anyway. So Well, let's just start at the top. Number 1, Georgia. That is my number 1 program in the country right now. Ashton, that's a first for me. Do you have Georgia first, surpassing Alabama, or did you just stick with what Alabama's the number 1 program in the country for 10, 15 years. Do you still have them, or did you have Georgia passing them up?
So I went with Georgia passing them up. And as a Georgia fan, that sometimes maybe feels like an easy decision, but believe me, it's not. Georgia's 29-1 in the last 2 years. They won a national championship against Saban. Mm-hmm. And it does look right now like Saban maybe has lost a little bit on the fastball, right? That's kind of a baseball term. By the way, people have said this about him before, and usually he goes on to win multiple national titles in the years right after that. So he still could do this. But right now, yes, I think Georgia has overtaken them as the number 1 program in college football. They won a national championship game, 65-7. That's never happened before. We haven't seen that. So at least not recently, right? Yeah, it's okay to put Georgia there, and it's not slanderous. It feels a little bit slanderous because Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time. He will, when he retires, he will go down in history as the greatest coach to ever do this. But right now, he's on the Saban's on the end of it, right? If he was on a timeline, he would be towards the latter. He's definitely the latter stages of his career, and Kirby's just up and coming. That's the truth of it. They're recruiting at almost the same clip. I mean, there's very little difference between these two teams in recruiting. People can get upset about this. That's fine. It is fine. It's okay to get upset about it. And I do hear where you're coming from, because Saban is the greatest to ever do it. But right now, it feels like Georgia's ahead only by a little bit. For me, there was a clear programs 1 and 2. Like there was a large
Yeah,
gap after the top 2 programs. And then things kind of get a little bit weird. Yeah, you can go a lot of different places with that.
right.
I have Georgia at 1.
And by the way, just for those listening out there, like last year, even after Georgia had beaten Alabama in the national title game, we both had Alabama as the number one program.
Right.
This is more of a big picture look. This is not just how good are they right now. How good were they last year? How good will they be this coming year? It's kind of all of that. You throw it all together a little bit. So, but yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I do think that Georgia has actually surpassed Alabama as the number one program in college football. I do think Alabama's closer to 1-3.
Yes,
and
right.
and I definitely think that Alabama could be right back in the number one spot a year from now, depending on what happens. But Georgia, they've got the whole thing running, rolling right along. Kirby Smart doing, he has emulated Nick Saban like no one else could, and yeah, I know that's probably music to your ears as the Georgia fan. Like you love every second of this, and you should be enjoying this. Georgia has actually done what no program has been able to do for a long time.
The yeah, okay. Like on Georgia first, and then I'm going to go into Alabama, who's my number 2 program. But to be a Georgia fan and to have this happen to you, it doesn't feel okay. Nick Saban was the boogeyman for so many years.
Yeah.
Like, you know what, like Aaron Rodgers did to Bears fans, like for all those years, that's what Nick Saban did to us. And really, it's kind of what he did to everybody, but like Georgia in particular. There were multiple years where I felt like Georgia was probably the best team in college football, except for Alabama, and we were never going to get past them. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. There is a lot of joy in Georgia right now. It's great to be at the top. Now to Alabama, who I have at number 2. The reason why a year ago I actually still had Alabama at number 1, despite losing the national championship game, was because they were returning a Heisman Trophy winner. They had the greatest coach of all time. They had a lot of really big-time playmakers on defense. You felt good about their edge rushers with Will Anderson. You thought like they have the best offensive player and the best defensive player in the country. With the best coach of all time, like how are they not winning a championship? You know they're going to be motivated and a little bit sour off of losing one, coming up just short. And they lose 2 games. Like they didn't even win their own division. They lose to they lost to LSU and Tennessee this past year. And it like that's disappointing. Like that's what dropped them down. It wasn't that Georgia Georgia did kind of take it and run with it a little bit, I guess, but Alabama disappointed this past year by my standards. I thought Alabama would crush everyone. It would be the revenge tour and they would just rampage through all of college football, like what we were used to seeing, and they didn't do it. So when I say that Alabama maybe, or Saban in particular, maybe Nick Saban's lost his fastball, that's what I mean, because they should have won it all this past year, and you will not be able to convince me otherwise. Like that's a fantastic football team that is probably they had the most talent just from on the talent composite. Like they were the most talented football team, and you have stars. Like it didn't make any sense to me why it didn't work for them. And that's why it's concerning. I'm not ranking them outside the top 10. I'm not dropping it's not a free fall. They're at 2. They're at 2 for me. And I think it's deserved.
Yeah, the top 2 were really easy for me, actually. I think now Alabama, they had to hire 2 new coordinators this offseason because they chose to, obviously. Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele were the hires there, didn't blow anybody away. If they had hired Garrett Riley and Jim Leonard as their coordinators, would it have been a little tougher for you to maybe drop them to 2? I think I still would have, but I know for me it would have been a little tougher.
The results on the field do have to matter at some point.
Yeah.
And with what they had this past year, it was a disappointment. Like I viewed this past year for them as a disappointment. And when you do have a disappointing season like that, you will get dropped. Like Ohio State, if that happened, if they lose 2 regular season games, they will get dropped. Like that's kind of how this thing works at the pinnacle of it. They're not getting dropped far, but they will go down a slot or 2. When you have teams like Georgia that's going undefeated and winning back-to-back championships, which no one's done in the CFP era, I think it's okay to have some fluidity there.
All right, the top 2 are easy. Where do you go at number 3? This is where you could go a lot of different ways.
I'm going with Michigan. With Michigan.
I knew you would, yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. Here's why. there's a lot of people out there that think that Ohio State is a better program than Michigan, and you might be correct. And I am kind of cutting against the grain here a little bit because Michigan does not recruit as good as Ohio State, objectively. Like, we can all agree that Ohio State still recruits much better than Michigan overall. But Michigan's beaten in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I will say this, Jim Harbaugh is not on the hot seat, but Ryan Day is. Like, Ryan Day, I'm serious. Ryan Day can't lose to Michigan next year and lose 3 in a row. He can't do it. He will not survive that. So it matters. It matters a lot that Michigan went to the shoe and won this past year. And I'm going to jump them over Ohio State. I think they should be. They've won the Big Ten the last 2 years. They went undefeated in the regular season, won a Big Ten championship. The loss to TCU in the playoff was very disappointing because Michigan was a better football team than TCU. I'm going to overlook it. Is it cause for concern? Maybe a little bit, yes. Michigan's had a hard time winning like big non-conference games, right? Like, that's documented. But I like what they're doing, man. I think the culture, they have a really good culture there. There's total buy-in, by the way. Like, Michigan's just thrilled to be beating Ohio State. Which, by the way, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State replacing quarterbacks. Michigan not replacing a quarterback. Right. They really like who they have, and they've got another 5-star coming in once he's gone. Feels good. Like we talked about trajectory, Michigan's on an upward one right now. So I have Michigan at 3.
I completely agree with the idea that they are on an upward trajectory. Last year we had them at number 10. I did not have them at 3. I did have them up significantly, but I do have Ohio State at 3. If you could somehow, obviously they've lost twice in a row to Michigan, but kind of what you were talking about, Georgia having won two national titles in a row and Alabama not, like, that has to account for something. The last 2 years have to count for something. But I do think there's a little bit of a difference in those two things where Bama, they underperformed quite a bit last year. It seemed like Ohio State, they really underperformed in one game. And then if you look at their playoff performance, it was significantly better than what I saw from Michigan. I think if that kick goes in, we're talking about the defending champs here, like, unquestionably. If Michigan had actually beaten TCU and gone to the title game and maybe lost by 10 points to Georgia, I think I'd probably be a little more inclined to agree with you and having them at number 3. But the way the season ended last year and the fact that they're not recruiting like Ohio State or 10 other teams, honestly, between them,
right?
It's just concerning enough to me. I like the way Ohio State is recruiting. It's not Georgia and Alabama. I think a couple of years ago, you could have said they were sort of in that same tier. I think they're now sort of in their own tier recruiting-wise, like right behind those two giants. And now this last year, they didn't have the number 3 class, but I'm just talking like recruiting over the last several years and looking forward. I think they're kind of the clear number 3 recruiting power in the country, but they're closer to 4 than to 3. And so this is where I do think there is a pretty big drop off from Alabama to Ohio State right now, but I do still have Ohio State at number 3.
Is it not at all concerning to you the lack of toughness that Ohio State has shown in big games?
Yes.
like CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud is a fantastic quarterback. He may go number 1 overall in this year's draft. And what is the biggest game that he won in his 2 years at Ohio State with elite NFL receivers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. He won a few somewhat big games, but you're right. He did lose the big ones. The toughness is a problem. I do think that with the second year under their defensive coordinator, like, some continuity there will help. The toughness thing, I do think you can talk about all of that, and then it all comes down to they almost beat Georgia in the playoff. Like,
right,
a bad kick from a kicker, or you could even say Marvin Harrison getting injured. I'm not saying that's necessarily the reason they lost, but they were that close, a whisker away from winning the national title last year. You can't say the same for Michigan. You can't really say the same for anybody else in the country, including Alabama.
So you thought Ohio State was the second best team in the country last year?
I think by the time January rolled around, they were. I do think that if Ohio State had played Michigan again in the playoff, I probably would have picked him. I don't know.
But
Like,
what would have been different? Like what would have been different there? Like, okay, in the second half of the last two Ohio State Michigan games, Ohio State has, it's not just that they were a little bit shell shocked, like they were definitely the less physical, less aggressive team and the team that flinched and made mistakes. So like what, like that's I think that's where I keep coming back, but like I have Michigan ahead of them for that reason. That I think Michigan's built to beat Ohio State. Ohio State is built to beat anyone else but Michigan. Like Ohio State's built to beat Alabama, Georgia, Clemson. Like they're somehow like a yeah, like I think Michigan has a little bit of, they occupy some headspace of Ohio State. Ohio State focused on that game for 365 days and they came out like flat in the second half. Like that. I went back and watched the whole game again like yesterday
yeah,
just to, because I was just trying to go back over like how did that even happen? But like it's concerning. Like they're gonna have to go
absolutely.
to Ann Arbor next year with a breaking in a new quarterback with a coach that has a ton of pressure. I like Michigan. Like I really like Michigan to win that game, and Michigan's going to be favored in that game, probably, or at least currently they are right now. So
Yeah,
yeah, like I understand what you're saying, and Michigan hasn't recruited as well as Ohio State, no question about it. They've disappointed in recruiting overall, but I think there's no question. There's no question for me which team I would trust more in big games because I think Ohio State is struggling a little bit now. This does take me to my number 4 program, and that's going to be Ohio State because
okay.
like they are really good. And who are you going to put ahead of them? Like you're going to put Clemson ahead of them? No. Like are you going to put what, Texas? No. A&M? No. Like LSU? I thought about it, but no. Like Ohio State, they haven't won a championship since 2014, but they've been very, very consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like times like last year where they lose 2 regular season games, or that's
One,
shocking. They lost to Michigan and Oregon. Oh, sorry, I meant in 21. Sorry,
21.
yeah, like
Okay.
2 years ago. Two, not last season, the season before, where they lost to Oregon and then they lose to Michigan. Last year they were 11-0 going into the game.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot of consistency there. The struggle for me is that they don't seem to want to stop the run or tackle, and like that ends up mattering at some point. And it's going to be a concern until I am proven otherwise. I'm always going to have that question mark about Ohio State. But they have figured out one thing, is that when you get an NFL quarterback and you put him with a bunch of NFL wide receivers, you can score points on pretty much anybody. And you can actually don't even really have to tackle that much, like when you just score touchdowns every time. And that's, Ohio State has figured that out.
Yeah, we've talked about them a lot. My number 4 is actually Clemson by a narrow margin.
Okay.
I if I think if they had not hired Garrett Riley, I don't want to overstate one coordinator hire, but like how much lower could they be if not for that hire? I mean, seriously, it could be several spots. And that to me feels like such a big deal. They're still recruiting quarterback about as well as anybody.
Yeah.
They're they're not recruiting at a ridiculous level like top 4, but they're kind of in that next tier and they recruit at the right positions. Like seems like they get lots of quarterbacks and defensive linemen and corners, that those type of positions that you can sort of fill in the gaps with a 3-star linebacker here and there, that type of thing.
Right.
Dabo, say what you will, but he's just one of the most established head coaches in college football. I like what the team looks like this coming season. Cade Klubnik, I do think, will be a step up for them at quarterback. I expect
Yes.
them to win the ACC. I know Florida State is a trendy pick. I think it'll probably be Clemson, and I don't hate their chances of competing for a title in the next several years again.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could happen. I just feel like their ceiling. Is it wrong to say I trust it just a little tiny bit more than Michigan's ceiling? Maybe not their floor, but their ceiling with Garrett Riley there as the offensive coordinator.
You say that you don't want to overstate the Garrett Riley hire, but like it's pretty much all that we've done all offseason.
Right.
It was a huge hire for them. that was a massive hire for Clemson. I'm going to be a little bit lower on them.
Okay.
I don't have them at 4, obviously, but the yeah, no, I don't hate it because they do have a coach there, a head coach there that's won 2 national championships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's not many others that have done that currently in college football. In
Right.
fact, there's just the 2 that are at
Yep.
their current jobs. So, and those are both, yeah, those are 1 and 2. So no, I don't hate it at all. It's definitely the blueprint for how it worked for Clemson when they won championships, right? Like you had a really good quarterback. You had a lot of nice pieces. You were very talented. Clemson's still very talented. I think that's maybe forgotten, very talented, but you had an elite quarterback, and it felt like you had a really good just play calling system. Like I don't want to just call it an offensive coordinator. Like your whole offensive system was very functional. It worked very very well. The receivers, they don't have the receivers they used to. Like that's kind of the bummer.
True.
Like they used to have what, T Higgins. It makes it a lot
Yeah.
easier when it's him and yeah, Justin Ross running down the field and making plays. But no, I like Clemson a lot, by the way. I'm going to have them just a little bit lower. I'm going to have A&M above them. Like
Wow.
I don't know if that's okay. It's risky. I understand. I am going on emotion here, like completely. I'm going to trust the recruiting rankings, and that does mean that I'm also going to be trusting Bobby Petrino. Dear Lord, what are we doing?
Do you have
I will.
A&M at number 5?
I do at number
Wow.
5, and they're okay. The talent is such a big deal. Like it's it's a prerequisite to win a national championship, right? A&M has loads of it. Now, were they too okay? I think we all knew that after they signed the greatest recruiting class of all time, that everyone was going to overhype them and they were going to disappoint because all of those 5 stars were 18 years old still, or 19. And then the second year, everyone was going to be down on them, right? Because they disappointed, and how dare they disappoint us twice? And the second year, they might actually be pretty good. Like I think
Yeah.
Texas A&M is going to be really good. They're going to be a really good football team. They're not going to be quite playoff good, but they have a ceiling of within the next year or 2 of absolutely being that top shelf team, a team that, by the way, could play against anyone simply because they have enough NFL players on their roster to do that.
Yeah.
I like Connor Wigman. I do. No, okay, hang on. I'm still talking myself into this one. I like the talent. I'm really buying into the talent. Good for them. Yeah, I'm gonna have A&M at 5.
Yeah, I was maybe just a little more hard on teams that really underperformed a year ago. I don't have them really close to 5. We had them at 5 a year ago. So I was there with you last year. I need a
Right.
little more proof of concept. I'm a little more in wait and see mode with them because everything you say, I could see it. Like I could see them making the playoff next year. I really could.
Right. Right.
I have this is 5 is where I have Michigan. Like to me, it was a pretty clear top 5. Um, yeah, not necessarily the order was clear, but the top 5 teams to me were clear in some order. Michigan, by the way, like yeah, I am very impressed by the way they have raised their floor from like just a couple of years ago. We would have
Right.
probably ranked them at what 12,
You
14.
remember
Like
you remember how bad the COVID year was for Michigan?
yes, it was
It was
terrible.
awful. They weren't good at all. And then the 2 years following that up to just to rattle that off with 2 playoff appearances and Big
Yeah,
Ten championships is that's incredible. Like it was and if they do it again, even Vince will have Michigan next year in the top 3 like he should have this year because like yeah, like it's you do it once, it's a fluke. You do it 2, it's a trend. You do it 3 times in a row, like that's just how it is. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And if like the Big Ten is there, so no, I own all the Michigan stock already. Like you can't buy any more Michigan stock because I currently own all of it.
No, you're right. Like if they beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten again, a third year in a row, I'll absolutely have them over Ohio State in my program rankings a year from now. I don't think it's going to happen. Like I
Yeah,
just lean towards Ohio State. I also feel like Michigan, kind of the main thing they did was start beating the teams they're supposed to beat, which is sort of an underrated thing in college football.
yeah,
But
yeah,
they played a lot of teams they were supposed to beat the last couple of years. Like
yeah.
last year especially that non-conference schedule was just horrific. It was ugly to look at.
Yeah.
And it looks about the same this year. So they're going to win a lot of games again, which is great. But really, it comes down to that big game, the end of November. And hey, if they do it again, it could happen. Yeah, I'll have them over Ohio State next year.
Okay.
Who do you have after Texas A&M? Is this where Clemson falls in, or you still got somebody else coming?
No, no, this is Clemson. I have Clemson at
Okay.
6. The I didn't want to. You could have easily, for me, flipped Clemson and A&M. Those two were like neck and neck, and they couldn't be more different programs. Clemson's the team that
Yeah.
has done it before, right? Clemson's
Hmm.
the team that has done it before. They do everything the right way. Their Dabo goes to church and does all that stuff. Jimbo, not so much. Like, yeah, they just couldn't be different. And A&M is a team for me that's on the rise, and that's why I had him just ahead. But Clemson, yeah, there was very, very small margins, right? Yeah, for me right there. And you go with like Dabo's won 2 national championships, and to be able in a year where everyone was looking for a creative offensive coordinator to go out and get the biggest name out there and the guy that I think there was a lot of confidence in Garrett Riley. I know we do as a pod, and to be able to pair him with your 5-star quarterback and a really nice running game, and you got a lot of talent on defense. Like, yeah, I think Clemson's winning the ACC. I think Florida State is a little overhyped. I know you do as well. I like where Clemson's at as a program. There's no question that they've taken some steps back since Trevor Lawrence left. I think that was maybe a little bit inevitable. But if Cade Klubnik, I think he'll have a really good year. If he does, they could absolutely be a playoff team. So yeah, I have Clemson. They slide just in behind A&M. I will probably Troy's not going to be happy about that one. Our buddy Troy is a Clemson fan. He does not like A&M. He may message me about that one, but yeah, I feel confident right now.
My number 6 team is LSU. I really I did not expect the year they had last year, and I know it wasn't perfect. They lost to A&M actually, which
Yeah,
was crazy, but they did. Obviously, they beat Alabama, and they won their division. They went to the SEC title game.
right.
Brian Kelly is clearly like a top 7 coach in college football. They're recruiting like LSU always recruits. They're. I feel like they always had the ceiling, and Brian Kelly brought the floor up along like to a place where it's supposed to be.
Right.
And so I don't have them quite to the level of a Clemson or a Michigan, but to me, they are the kind of the top of the next tier, if you will, of teams, of just teams I trust, really. I don't know that I would trust them to go to the SEC title game again this coming season or whatever, but I do think they will be a very solid team as long as Brian Kelly is there.
That's LSU was the next team for me. That's who
Mhm.
I had as well. I think, yeah, I think you said it well. It was for all of those reasons. Brian Kelly brought the stability. I think that
Mhm.
was much needed. The adult in the room, and yeah, I think we talked a lot about fit. Like, does this guy fit? And he had the weird accent and all. But you know what? Winning is a fit in Baton Rouge. They like to win. And the last 3 coaches there had won national titles. I'm not saying that he will or he won't, but I think he's got a good shot. Like, I think
Sure.
I think LSU has a ton of just natural like talent that's just right there in state. I think that he'll be able to get. Yeah, I like what they did. Huge win, by the way, for him year 1 against Alabama. Massive, massive win. And we're going to talk about teams that will benefit the most from going to a 12-team playoff. I think that LSU and Penn State are 2 of the teams that will benefit so much from just extra. Yeah, they'll be in the playoff almost every year. Don't let them get a home playoff game, like a night
Yeah.
game. Are you kidding? Like, that place would be bananas. So yeah, I like the trajectory of the program. I think they're going to be very stable. They're going to be a tough out for, yeah, as long as Kelly is there.
I agree. All right, my number 7 team is USC. I had them a little lower last year, but I was impressed by what they did in year 1. I know the defense wasn't great. I Year 1 under Lincoln Riley, obviously. Um, Caleb Williams winning the Heisman, and he's back again. And you have other 5-star quarterbacks coming in too, and that's just always going to be a consistent theme as long as Lincoln Riley is at USC. You're always going to be able to trust their offense. If their defense was as good as their offense, we'd be talking about them up in that top tier with Alabama and Georgia. Like, I like it really would be like if their defense was to that level, but it's not. So that I have them at 7. To me, that felt about right. I don't know. Like I could go back and forth. Again, the order here from like 6 to 12 for me was debatable. Like you could kind of swap those teams around however you want. I ended up with USC at number 7. Any thoughts on them? Do you have them significantly lower, or is that about where you were thinking about them?
No, I had them a bit lower. There is no chance that I would trust a Lincoln Riley defense as like, and the fact that he re-ups Alex Grinch is mind-boggling to me.
Mhm.
You're right that if USC's defense matched their offense, that they would be like on an Alabama level. They have zero shot of ever making that happen. Like I'm so baffled by it. Like, how can you waste such good quarterback play and like get absolutely dominated and it's always the same thing. It's because you can't stop the other team at all, like at all,
Mhm.
and you can't tackle. And yeah, Utah, like you're gonna have to figure out how to beat Utah somehow, and like they're a matchup nightmare for you. Yeah, it's a whole thing. I have USC lower. Do we want to you want to run through like our current picks?
Yeah, so we've done 7 teams each. I have Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Michigan, LSU, and USC. Ashton's top 7 are Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Clemson, and LSU. Where do you go next, Ashton? Number 8.
So just you have to hear me out on this one.
All right.
I'm gonna go with Oklahoma. I think it's a program that is they're so consistent. And Venables, it's a little scary. Year one is a little scary. I could have even been tempted to have them higher. I really could have. Oklahoma did recruit well, and they did get their quarterback. They got one of the few 5-star quarterbacks out there. Those things are like gold, right? There's not many of them. And when it works out, like he covers up kind of all the problems that you have. I think the defense will be drastically better under Venables year 2. And yeah, I like where they are overall as a program. I'm the coach we're still figuring out what Venables is. I like what they are as a program, and I have a lot of trust in Oklahoma as a whole because they win. Like they've won for so long, and that 8 feels about right. It feels about right. They've been to the playoff a number of times. Like that's a team that easily in 2 years you could easily see them back in it.
Yeah, last year we had them at 6, and I think we both thought that it would be fairly seamless from Lincoln Riley to Brent Venables.
Right.
I would probably still be just as high on them as I was a year ago if they had gone 10-2 last year.
Right.
And when we had, or even if we had seen some serious growth, which we saw maybe a little bit, I was really disappointed by them last year. Like it was pretty ugly. Both sides of the ball at different times.
I know.
Just it was pretty terrible. And I know
The
the recruiting
Texas
is really good.
the
The Texas
Texas game.
game, I
That was
just can't get
awful.
that out of my head.
I know.
I have Oklahoma a little bit lower. Like I not terribly much lower, but I do have them a
Right.
little lower. I have them behind a couple other schools that also had first year coaches last year, and I just liked the trajectory of those other two schools a little bit better. Um, I think Oklahoma. I always viewed them as like kind of the ultimate high floor program,
Right.
and then last year sort of shattered
I
that for
know.
me.
No, I
So
think that's I
yeah.
think that's well said. It was surprising to see that. Like that was like
Mhm.
there's no chance that we thought that would happen. Like you think the floor is like 9-3. Like that's kind of like that's a
Yeah.
bad year. That's a bad year for Oklahoma. And then yeah, no, I do agree. I had him at 8. It
Mhm.
felt about right. I wasn't going to put him below Texas because like Texas has not shown me that they can handle success. You know what I'm saying? Whereas
Sure.
Oklahoma at least has a bit. And I had him ahead of Oregon simply because like I think that they can recruit a little bit better than Oregon can. I mean, even though that's kind of getting challenged anymore, but like I still do trust Oklahoma over the long run to be better than Oregon. I had him over you. I had Oklahoma over USC, which is like I think that like those two programs are always going to be like intertwined, right?
Yes.
And I think Oklahoma was a better job. Like I know that Lincoln Riley left, and I understand him leaving, but maybe he didn't want to go to the SEC. I don't know what it was. Oklahoma is a really good job though, and like that's kind of
It
where I
is.
kept coming back to. So yeah, I had Oklahoma, and I'll stand by it.
one of the things right now with college football is it feels like some of these big brands are rebounding a little bit, and
Yeah.
there's too many jobs that are top 10 jobs to all fit into the top 10. Is
There's
kind
like
of my
15
opinion.
top 10 jobs. Yeah.
Right, exactly,
Right.
exactly. My number 8 team is Notre Dame. There's kind of an easy comparison to Oklahoma because they both had the first year head coach last year, former defensive coordinator.
Right.
I Notre Dame did, like, they started as bad or worse than Oklahoma last year, losing to Marshall and Stanford. But then you saw clear growth, and they crushed Clemson. They beat South Carolina in a bowl game, and I like what they did with the quarterback room. They brought in Kenny Minchie. They brought in Sam Hartman. They're bringing in C.J. Carr. They're in the mix for a number of 5 stars in the class of 2025. That has been one of the biggest Achilles heels for the Notre Dame program in the last 10 years is quarterback play, as well as the receiver room. Both of those look like they could be better than they've been in over a decade. And I hear, so obviously I'm a Notre Dame fan. I hear reports from spring practice. A lot of the beat guys they're not coming out and saying that Notre Dame is like for sure going to be really, really good this year. But what they say is Notre Dame players, like, they just have more, a little more, a few more of the freaks this year. Like, they just have a few more. Everyone just moves a little bit better than they used to on Notre Dame's roster. Like, there's just more athletes. And that's one thing that Marcus Freeman has done in his several years at Notre Dame, starting as defensive coordinator and then last year as a head coach, is just recruiting more athletes, more guys that can move. Um, I just trust the trajectory of the program better than Oklahoma. Some of that is a bit of a feel thing. They've also, you could argue that they've also been right there with Oklahoma the last 5 years as far as high floor programs. And both of those crashed a little bit last year, but Notre Dame not as significantly as Oklahoma.
Is it at all okay? I had Notre Dame a little bit lower, and it's not really based on the results on the field that I had them lower. Notre Dame's done a lot of winning in recent years,
Mm-hmm.
multiple playoff appearances, right? But it's concerning, or I would find it concerning that when your defensive minded head coach finds an offensive coordinator that he really wants to hire and you kind of cheap out on it, which is kind of what at least what it looked like, right? That was the reason that they gave
Mm-hmm.
us, at least. That's like, are you really serious? Like, are you serious about sitting here at the table with the big boys? Because we know that Oklahoma and Oregon and Texas, some of these other schools, USC, schools that they're going to be compared with, are going to write that check to
Right.
get who the coach wants and to make that work. So it's a little concerning. Now, I do agree that Notre Dame's recruiting has definitely been better under Freeman. I think that's just objective. That's he's done a better job there. It's a little interesting when he doesn't get the coach that he wants, and it's for me it would cause a little bit of hesitancy. I'm going to go with Oregon as my next pick.
Okay.
It was Oregon or Notre Dame. I saw Oregon as a team, like, yeah, when you compare the two, Oregon has so much money. Like, it feels like they have almost unlimited money, like from the Nike, their
Mm-hmm.
Nike deals and all that. And Notre Dame's like just very tight. Like, that's just kind of the feel that I have right now, the programs. And so I went with Oregon, very slim margin. I like where they're at. The recruiting, by the way, that Lanning has done there has been really good. I don't think
Yeah.
we talk about that enough. Oregon's done a really good job. They have a lot of talent out there in Eugene right now. So I'll go with Oregon right now as the next one on the list.
Yeah, there's lots of comparisons there between, like, well, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Oregon. Obviously,
Yeah.
last year, all first time head coaches, former defensive coordinators. Notre Dame and Oregon both lost Dante Moore and Peyton Bowen last year.
Right.
So, but yeah, I do like what they're doing. They're recruiting very well. Kind of similar, even as far as like last year's season goes on the field. Like, if you compare it to like a Notre Dame, like,
Yeah.
not quite where they had been the previous several years, but you could see like some good signs, and they had some good games, especially
They had
towards the
some
end of the year.
they had some good wins. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I viewed kind of all of these as very similar.
Yeah.
I actually also have Oregon next. I have them at 9. Um, to me, I almost feel like they're more similar to Notre Dame as far as where they're at right now than Oklahoma does. Um, Neither team started last year all that well, but you could see clear growth towards the end of the season. You could see some big wins coming up. They developed Bo Nix. Now they did lose Kenny Dillingham, which hurts a little bit. We'll see, but yeah, like I have no problem with you having Oregon over Notre Dame. I have them just one slot underneath. To me, they're about the same thing.
Yeah.
Although they do it different ways.
They do it drastically different ways,
Yes.
but yeah, it feels like the results are very similar.
By the way, sorry, I was going to say one little thing about your Notre Dame point. Not long after that whole thing with Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator from Utah,
right?
Notre Dame went and hired Micah Shrewsbury, the Penn State basketball coach, who was highly sought after, and they paid him a $4 million buyout.
Right.
So I don't know if that means they changed or if it means that they were valuing basketball more, or I have no idea what it means. It's just an interesting thought.
Something just to keep an eye on. You can just say it. Like,
Yes.
we'll when Notre Dame goes to look for another assistant, which they probably will next year at some point, do they go to the top shelf? Or are they gonna we'll just try to we'll find some value in the second shelf. Yep. No, that's Notre Dame was the next one on the list for me. Okay. We mentioned, these were all kind of the first year head coaches that were former defensive coordinators, and they were all kind of recruited about the same type of player or the same player in a couple of instances. So, and I think it was very frustrating early on last year. Like, you think back to, was it the Marshall game where it was like, I think that was game 2, right? Is that right? That was the second game after Ohio State. And it looked, I watched almost the whole thing, and it looked just disjointed. It didn't look cohesive at all.
They lost to Ohio State twice, really, is what I think happened.
Fair. And after that game, they did have another bad loss, but like, they were able to beat Clemson later on in the year. And it felt like at the end of the year that they were definitely a better team than what they were when they started, which is kind of what you're looking for, because you're not expecting a first-year head coach just to come in and set the world on fire. So he did what he needed to do. He picked up the recruiting. I like him. I think it was a good team for me. That's pick number 10 for me?
Yes.
I feel like Notre Dame's a top 10 program. I do. Definitely. I have them at number 10. And we can get into it here in a little bit, where there's a couple of teams that I'm going to have below them, which I feel could so easily be higher than them. But right now, Notre Dame's been to multiple playoffs, and that does have to matter. Whereas a lot of the teams below them have not been. So I have Notre Dame there at number 10.
My number 10 team, you're going to hate it so much. I can hear it already. My number 10 team is Texas. I know that they have not been all that successful on the field the last number of years, but I was kind of looking at over the last 5 years, and I was a little bit surprised that they weren't worse. They weren't world beaters, but over the last 5 years, if you kind of look at all the final AP polls of each year and combine it all together, they've been about the number 13 team in the country the last 5 years, which is not what they should be, but number 13 is not that bad. And then I started looking at the trajectory. I started looking at the recruiting that they're doing. They just signed a great class, bringing in Arch Manning, bringing in some really good receivers. They're finally starting to fix the offensive line, which was just a huge problem for so long. They got the transfer receiver from Georgia. Remind me of his name.
A.D. Mitchell.
A.D. Mitchell, who's really good. They have Xavier Worthy. I really like their receiver room. This is basically just putting a little trust in what I think they could be this year and in their recruiting going forward. You hate it, don't you?
I hate that so much. Like, they don't win. Like, they don't really win that much. And you're right. Like, overall, in the last number of years, they've actually had decent finishes to the year. Like, there was one year where they beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And that was within the last 5 years. That was in 18, 19, one of them. Like, they've had some decent years. It's every time they do anything good, they'll have a decent early season performance. You remember in week 2, they almost beat Alabama, and Quinn Ewers goes down, and Texas was back. Remember, Texas was back, and they're always back, and they're never back. And we're always told that they're back. And until I am proven wrong. Texas, just no, we're waiting. We're waiting on Texas. So for me, at number 11, I'm going with Penn State.
Okay.
I have Penn State ahead. By the way, I still have not mentioned USC.
Right.
I'm a little out on them right now. I like Penn State. I think I may have mentioned in this was a couple of weeks ago that Ohio State could finish third in the Big Ten East.
Yeah.
I like Penn State, man. Like the recruiting is picking up. There is a chance that Franklin is pulling off what Jim Harbaugh did. And he sits there and the fan base is not just terribly happy with him, and you're getting kind of results. It's working. It's not, we can't quite fire you, but like, we're not really sure. But the recruiting is picked up. He has a 5-star quarterback now. They can run the ball. They play really good defense. I like Penn State. Like, I think Penn State will knock off Ohio State or Michigan this year. One of the other. I'm maybe not both, but like Penn State could be a playoff team in 2 years. Like I think that possibly even this next year. They're a dark horse.
I also have Penn State at 11. I like that. Drew Allard, Nick Singleton, kind of everything you said. Like, I don't view them as having a national title ceiling necessarily. I don't know. Get back to
Right.
me on that. But
Right.
they have a Big Ten winning ceiling. Like, they absolutely do. And they've really settled down, it seems like, in the last couple years. I don't know that we view James Franklin as like a top 8 coach in the country, but he's sort of in that next tier. Like, he has his flaws, especially like on game day.
Yeah, well,
But
that's a big time to have a flaw.
it is. But he does a lot of the other stuff well. Like, they develop well, they recruit well, all of that stuff, which, I mean, you know, as a Georgia fan, you'd rather have the guy who recruits really well than the guy who always calls the perfect play on 3rd and 8. Like,
Sure.
you would. So,
Sure.
Penn State at 11, we both agree there. Where are you going next at your number 12 pick here?
I guess I have to go USC at some point, don't I? Like, I don't think I really have a choice. I'll go with USC a little bit begrudgingly. I don't think that Southern California is the draw that maybe everyone thinks that it was. This is not 2005 anymore. Like, those years are gone, and I don't know if those years will come back. Alabama goes to California and takes recruits. Georgia goes to to California and takes recruits. Ohio State does. Look at CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Brock Bowers, by the way, California kids, not at USC. And we thought that Lincoln Riley was going to go out there and turn the recruiting around. And they did okay. Like, they were okay. They finished at 8 like a year ago, like this past cycle that just concluded, which is it's okay. But I think we expected better. And for someone who can't really develop a defense, I'm going to have you like this spot feels about right for me, for USC. I could be proven wrong. I could be, because in the reality of it is that USC they were 4 quarters away from being a playoff team. Now, they would have gotten absolutely hammered by Georgia, but that's neither here nor there. They have a matchup problem with Utah, who they can't really seem to figure out. And that's going to keep being a problem until you get some better defenses or guys that are at least interested in tackling. So they're going to have a great offense. Like, they will, and they're going to be able to outscore a lot of teams in the Pac-12. They're going to win a lot of games. That's why I do have them this high. I just do not trust the defense and the recruiting very much at all.
Yeah, part of this, like me ranking them up at 7, it's just feel. Like, I'm a Notre Dame fan, and quite frankly, they scare me. Like,
Yeah.
when you have quarterback play like they have, you're always a threat to lose to that kind of team. Like, you're just never safe against that
Agreed.
team. And Caleb Williams clinched the Heisman against Notre Dame a year ago. Like, that's when it happened, and maybe I'm just still scarred from that. And scarred from seeing Drew Pine try to match Caleb Williams blow for blow was a bit rough. Yeah.
The receiver there was a bit of discrepancy at receiver as well.
There was. You're right. My number 12 team is Oklahoma. Okay. I think if they had gone 9-3 last year, they might be 6 spots higher. I don't know, and that's probably an overreaction. To me, they are in that top 12 more clear. Like, they're a lot closer to 11 than they are to 13 for me. To me, I had a top 12 that felt pretty clear in some order, and then a drop off after those 12. So I know we talked about them a lot, but yeah, Oklahoma is what rounds out my top 12.
Okay. Yeah, no, I have no problem with that. Now, here's where like here's more just a question, right? So there are teams like Florida, um,
Hmm.
Miami. And I'm not no, I leave Miami out of this. We'll go with teams like Florida, Tennessee, Washington.
Hmm.
How do those like as programs, them and Texas for me are just very comparable. Like I think that
Sure.
Florida and Texas are there's not much difference between like as far as programs. They were once proud programs, falling on a little bit of hard times. And but they still can easily go to the Sugar Bowl on any given year. You know what I'm saying? Like they can still
Hmm.
play like a good game. Florida can play a really good game and kind of go up against anyone. I mean, they beat Utah last year. Like Florida has good games in them. Florida and Texas for me are just like they're just razor thin. I'll go with Texas as my next pick. This is
Okay.
at number 13, right? A little bit maybe begrudgingly.
Sure.
But yeah, I this feels about right for me. This was yeah, we're kind of going off of a feeling thing. By the way, Texas is recruiting very well. Their talent composite, I think, is like number 6 right now. So they've
Hmm.
got a lot of talent there. They're bringing in some transfers. They're going to have good quarterback play, it would seem, for the
Hmm.
foreseeable future. Yeah, no, I think this is about right for Texas.
Yeah, you were comparing Texas and Florida. I was doing the same thing 1 year ago. We had them right next to each other on a list last year.
Yeah,
They felt like basically the same thing to me a year ago. And then last year, Florida went 6-6, Texas went 8-4. Sorry, I don't
right,
remember if they won their bowl games or not. Anyway, that was the regular season records. And Texas signed the number 3 class in the country, and
right.
Florida signed the number, was it 14 class in the country. Like, to me, like it was very
14.
much
Yeah.
like I was disappointed by what Florida did. Where Texas, yeah, it was a bit of a disappointing season, but you still saw some good things, and then you saw the number 3 class, including Arch Manning. So
Right.
to me, it felt like some separation there after that happened.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand what you're saying. I guess like my defense for Florida is that I think that when Florida gets it right, like Florida's program overall could be so high. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? I think Georgia has kind of put a little bit of a, yeah, they've definitely dumped some water kind of on the fire right there in Gainesville. But I think that's kind of what happens when you get like an all world team that just happens to be your arch rival, like Auburn. Auburn for all those years, like might have been really good, but we never knew because they could never beat Alabama. Florida, Florida could easily be a like another dark horse team. They're very similar to also like Penn State. Like if they could put it together and kind of step out of the shadow, like they
Hmm.
would have the all the other resources are there for Florida.
Yeah.
Like they have so much built-in resources just right there. The talent recruiting base is incredible right there. So I like Florida a lot. I think Florida kind of a sleeping giant a little bit. Like some of these teams here that I'm like in this category, they're teams that are kind of what Georgia was before Kirby got there. Like
Hmm.
I think that's a great that's exactly what it is. Like Georgia before Kirby got there was kind of a sleeping giant. Like they were just kind of sitting there and didn't have the energy or the juice. I think that's what Florida is. I'll go with Florida next. Yeah, I like who I'm not sure about Napier. I will be honest. I'm not sure about Napier, but I do think that Florida is a top job. Like Florida will be a very very attractive job if that one comes open.
Yeah, you're a couple ahead of me now. That was your 14. I'm still, and maybe that's fine because I'm ready for 13 and it's terrifying. Like, there was nobody I wanted to put at 13. I'm going Tennessee at 13. It feels wildly high, but I trust that offensive system. They bring in Nico Yamaliava. To me,
Nice job.
they feel, thank you. They
Yeah, that's
feel
well done.
kind of like USC, but like maybe just one step down. Like the next best thing to USC as far as like we know their offense is always going to be good because I trust that offensive system. And now they're recruiting better. They brought in the number 10 class in the country this last year. Will the defense ever be good enough for them to actually like win the SEC? Probably not. But I trust them, I think. I I could very easily see this going looking stupid like a year from now going back, why did I have them so high? But for now I have Tennessee at 13. My number 14 team, and then we can discuss all of these later. I'm just trying to catch up to you in our teams here.
Okay.
My number
Okay.
14 team, I finally have Texas A&M.
Oh,
I the talent level is higher than this. For me, it's the coaching and just like what was that last year? Like, what was that? Like, I wasn't expecting them to actually like be a top five team last year. But I expected
No,
them to go 8-4. Like,
right,
you have to go 8-4, and
right.
they didn't even come close, man. It was
No,
horrific, and that's even with beating LSU late, which it almost
yeah.
makes it more aggravating. Like, where was that? Like, what is going on in this program? To me, it just feels kind of rotten. Like, I don't know what's going on. So, yeah, there you have it. I have Tennessee at 13, Texas A&M 14. You got Texas and Florida in those two spots, which I understand.
I do. I trust Florida as a program more than Tennessee. Like
Fair.
Tennessee, you're right. They were fantastic last year, and it worked very well. But that's what happens when you have a couple NFL receivers and an NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh Heupel is a quarterback whisperer. Like I think Joe Milton will have a really good year this year, and then Nico following up whenever he gets a chance. I think Tennessee will have good quarterback play. I just as a program, like I'm not willing to go there yet as a program. I'm not. For
Sure.
me, that's why I still have Florida there ahead of them. Not much. Like this right here is where like the SEC teams kind of come in. You could also throw in like teams like South Carolina, like that are kind
Mm-hmm.
of like on an uptick. I,
There's a reason I did not want to put anyone at 13. Like, to me, it felt high, but I didn't know who else I should put there. So that's where I went with it.
it's where it gets a little bit just like subjective. Like you can kind of like I have a feeling about this team. I guess
Yeah.
I struggle with Tennessee just a little bit as a program because maybe it's because of how many years that they've struggled. Like they haven't been good in a long time until last year. Yeah, and then A&M. I mean, obviously, you know how I feel about A&M. I think they should be higher. So,
Yeah. Round out your top
ah,
15. You got Florida at 14. What's your number 15 program?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask. I was just yeah, we were just going to act like that one didn't happen. Okay, I'm deciding between two. I'm going to go with Miami.
Okay.
I just yeah, it's. Do I feel good about it? No, no, I don't. Is the ceiling for Miami is exceptionally high.
Yeah.
The recruiting, by the way, last year, even though they lost some guys, the recruiting was still really good. They had a top, I think they finished number 7, I believe, from this past cycle. So yeah, number 7. Do I feel great about their floor? No, no, absolutely not. But I am gambling a little bit on some of these teams that like A&M I had really high. I'm gambling a little bit with Miami as well. Teams that like someone's gonna come up here and shock you next year. And Miami could be one of those teams. Like
Yeah.
there is a chance that it could all work out. Yeah, new offensive coordinator, like maybe Van Dyke is finally the quarterback that we all thought he was going to be. Yeah, like there is a scenario where it works out for Miami.
Yeah, you have them at 15. I could see it in a year from now. I sort of viewed them the same way I viewed Texas A&M. Like, what the crap was that last year?
I know.
like,
Yeah.
like it's one thing if you go, I mean, under Cristobal, like they could have even gone 7-5, and I would have understood it. They didn't even come close to that. Like, it
Yeah.
just, I I liked their recruiting, obviously, and they
Right.
one of the key things was the offensive line recruiting.
Yeah.
I just, man, like, can you trust a Miami team or any team coached by Mario Cristobal to put together an offense that is what it should be, what the talent says it should be? The order of the three major Florida schools is very intriguing. Like, you
Yeah.
could pull five different people and get five. Well, yeah, you could pull 100 different people and there would be no agreement really on what order those three teams should be. I had Miami pretty clearly third of those three schools.
Really.
I actually have Florida State at 15. That's the one you haven't mentioned yet. So
Yeah.
I guess at this level of the game, like, I know their ceiling right now is probably the lowest of the three. Their
Mm.
recruiting is maybe the lowest of the three, but they are playing really well and they're bringing in portal guys and they're keeping guys who would have been high draft picks, and they have maybe a top 5 quarterback in the country. Like, Mike Norvell has done an excellent job of raising the floor significantly at Florida State. I don't know that I trust them to win the ACC or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to embarrass me next year.
Yeah.
Look at it that way.
I think my strategy with by taking Miami and A&M so high like I did, like I'm buying low. Like I'm when everyone's out on these guys, I'm buying low, which is it is kind of a strategy. And there's no doubt that
Yeah.
A&M and Miami both had disastrous seasons. Like I'm not even defending that. But I do think that like the recruiting does matter. And at some point, like I think this is what maybe what Kirby was accused of a little bit. It's just throwing 5 stars at the problem, but it does work. Like it does. You can beat
Yeah.
a lot of teams by doing that. And yeah, so that's probably why. Like I definitely feel like Miami has a higher ceiling long term than Florida State. Long
Yeah.
term.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's no doubt that Florida State is the more consistent team, and probably next year possibly will should be the better team. Like I think we'll agree on
Yeah.
that. Um, this is number 16 for me.
Let me just recap our top 15s real quick before you
Okay.
move on to that. So my top 15: Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Michigan, LSU, USC, Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Florida State. Ashton's top 15: Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Clemson, LSU, Oklahoma, Oregon, Notre Dame, Penn State, USC, Texas, Florida, and Miami. Go,
Uh-huh.
Ashton.
Uh-huh. All right, here's where I'll go with Tennessee. I'll go ahead and put
Okay.
Tennessee at number 16. Like I don't think Tennessee's far behind the programs that I have just ahead of them. Like I don't really at this level, it's you're kind of projecting a little bit. We talked about Tennessee's quarterback play. It's probably going to be good for the foreseeable future, and you can win a lot of games by having a competent quarterback and a really good play caller. Like that'll win you games. You're maybe not going to be. I don't think Tennessee is as far as a program, they're not Florida. Like I don't think that they can recruit long term like Florida can recruit. But I think Heupel's a good coach, and they're going to have some consistency now with like just yeah like we had so much coaching turnover for all those years that it was kind of laughable a little bit with what Tennessee is. But they are turning a corner, and we will give them credit for that. I'll have Tennessee at 16.
Yeah, my number 16 team is Florida. I have them just right behind Florida State, went back and forth in the order. It
Right.
feels like you kind of have the one team that's a little more unrealized potential, and the other team is a little more outplaying their talent.
Right.
But I would maybe have put Florida higher if I had actually seen them recruit a little bit better this last cycle.
Fair.
Because if they're supposed to be the team that's the unrealized potential team, well, maybe they needed a little bit better talent than they actually recruited. So not
Yeah.
that it was a bad class. I'm not saying that at all. But yeah. Anyway, so I got them at 14. Sorry, 16.
Yep.
Number 17. Where are you going next, Ashton?
Florida State, yeah,
Okay.
the last of the Florida of the big three Florida
Mm-hmm.
schools. It was very close, really, between Florida, Miami, and Florida State. There's not much margin between any of them. Florida State does feel like the program that doesn't recruit at the highest. Now they are the lowest in the talent composite rankings, and they don't currently have
Yeah.
a 5-star. But like I think you the quarterback they have the best quarterback though
Yeah.
like of all of them, and they were the best team last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think can be the best team this next year too. So I'll go with Florida State. Norvell, by the way, do you remember when Travis Hunter like pulls like he decommits, pulls flips just like at the 11th hour and goes to Dion, and it felt like Florida State that could be something that where they never quite recover from as a program.
Yeah.
They recovered. Like
Mm-hmm.
they did a remarkable job at like just studying everything and
Mm-hmm.
then playing well on the field. So yeah, I like Florida State. They have a really big non-conference week 1, a neutral site against LSU. That one's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. My number 17 team is Washington. My formula had them a little higher. I had to manually drop them a little bit. Not because I don't like them. I do like them. Kalen DeBoer, like, what can you say about that guy, huh? Like,
Yeah.
I really liked that hire at the time, and it was ended up looking even better in year one than I expected. Michael Penix might be a top 5 quarterback in the country. They got really good receivers. They're
Yeah.
recruiting a little bit better. Maybe not where they could. Like, I still think they have room to improve there, but I think they're kind of that in that group of Pac-12 teams out west that are all sort of in like the top 5 teams are all somewhat similar. And yeah, I end up having Washington at 17. By the way, you mentioned there not being a lot of gap between the Florida schools. there's not a lot of gap from 15 to 30. Like there's really
Fair.
not.
Fair. Yeah. You can kind of take whoever you want and you can't really call you dumb. Like I'm
Right.
not going to have TCU here, but like if you would throw TCU, like I'm not going to argue with you. Like they want a playoff game,
Yeah.
and they're recruiting better too. No, I have Washington. They were my next one. This
Okay.
is number 18. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll go with Washington. You mentioned DeBoer and like the job that he did there. And yeah, like with Penix, I thought Penix was back to his Indiana days. Like
Yeah.
it looked like his really good season for the Hoosiers when it was working. So Washington was good last year. They beat Oregon head to head. I think that kind of gets overlooked a little bit. Washington's going to be a tough out. And by the way, the Pac-12 super deep. A lot of
Yeah.
good teams in the Pac-12. I don't think it's talked about enough with that either. So Washington's going to be good. Like they're a legitimate team. And a program, by the way, Washington has a playoff appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're getting down to the place where like a lot of the teams here have never even sniffed the playoff. Washington's actually been there. So yeah, like we'll give them credit for that too. I like that. I think they will be very steady for the next number of years.
Yep. One slot behind them, I have Utah, another Pac-12 team. Feels like they probably have the higher floor, but maybe a little bit lower ceiling. Just very steady. You know what you're getting out of Utah. They have a great coach, Kyle Whittingham, and yeah, just always a solid team. They don't recruit at an excellent level, but they recruit okay to kind of to a specific pattern. Like they look for specific body types and sort of yeah, like with that type of recruiting, you're never going to maybe win a title or anything like that, but you can compete for the Pac-12 and you can actually win it, like as we've seen
Last
with them. So
2 years, yeah.
twice, yes. So Utah about as steady as you can get. I have them at number 18.
Utah is number 33 in the talent composite.
Hmm.
Like it's low. Like they're very low, but there's no question that they're they're so much better than that on the field.
Yeah.
They definitely play above their stars. Yeah, no doubt. Um, so I'm between two here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and pull the trigger with Wisconsin. I'm going to go
Okay.
with Wisconsin next. Love the hire, by the way. Love who they hired at as the OC with Longo. I like they're bringing in quarterbacks. Like they might
Yes.
actually have a dynamic offense that actually throws the ball. Like they had a good offense. They've always run the ball. Now, if like imagine with some balance, like I think that they could just be fantastic. Wisconsin is in the Big Ten West, and that makes life very easy because not really many teams are good out there. I think Wisconsin. No, I
Yep.
believe in Fickle. I really do. They've been a consistent program for the last 2 decades, at least the last 10 years. I think they can get back quickly to being a team that's 10-2,
Hmm.
maybe on a good year 11-1. Like I think they have that kind of ceiling. I like Wisconsin.
Complete agreement from me. I also have Wisconsin at number 19. I I was actually a little bit surprised looking back on kind of their last 5 years or so. I was actually a little bit surprised that they weren't a little higher, just in their on-field performance. In my formula, thought I should have them a little lower than this, but they hired Luke Fickle, man. Like, can you
Right.
overstate the importance of that? And Phil Longo, and like that is a big deal, man. And I just trust them so much now that they have Fickle more than I did the last couple years. And you
Right.
mentioned the Big Ten West. That might go away soon if they go to kind of a
Sure.
different scheduling format. But I do think Wisconsin, even in the future Big Ten with USC, UCLA, like they will always be clearly in the top half of that league. And yeah, I gave that hire an A plus. I don't know how they could have possibly done any better than that. So I got them at number 19 as well.
Yeah, agreement. Going down to number 20, I'm going to go with Utah. And I think Utah, they get to play the disrespect card mainly because they're much better than number 20 on the field. And
Hmm.
I am disrespecting them right now by having them at 20. Like when you look at recruiting, it bothers me how like they don't recruit super well. Now they're not terrible, but like they're 35, like consistently. Like that's kind of
Yeah.
like they're in that range, but they're really good on the field. Like they could have beaten Ohio State in the Rose Bowl like a year and a half
Hmm.
ago. Like they were a really good team. They beat USC to win a Pac-12 title this past year, knocked them out of the playoff. Um, Kyle Whittingham is the ultimate professional. Like I think he would do great at like Auburn. like I think that he like a program that needs some stability and needs there to be an adult, maybe even like LSU before Kelly went there. Like
Yeah.
he is such an underrated coach.
Hmm.
He really is. He has done a fantastic job of turning these 3 and 4 stars and like consistently playing with and beating big time programs. So yeah, I have Utah at 20, and it's disrespectful to them. I'll go ahead and admit it.
Number 20, I have TCU. I know it's kind of a 1 year wonder type of thing, but Sonny Dykes, I think, is a good coach. I think one of the things more than just going to the title game this last year, I like what I've seen with them in the portal so far, like since then. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they could very much sort of become that destination program in the Big 12 for the former 5-star recruits who couldn't quite crack the starting lineup at Alabama or wherever. I think that could become a thing at TCU.
Hmm.
I I don't think that they can really replicate what they did last year, but they don't have to settle into number 20 or so in the country. To me, that felt about right. I could also have seen them 10 spots lower, honestly. Like that's how this whole thing works when we get down to this spot. But I did want to give them some props. I mean, it is a program power ranking, so it is influenced at least somewhat by last year. And last year they were pretty freaking good. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah. Don't mind that at all. I'm going to go with South Carolina.
Yes.
I think, yeah, Shane Beamer, up and coming coach. The recruiting is still kind of on the rise, really. Like he's kind of surprising. He didn't have a great class, but he did finish ahead of Michigan last year and was able to get a 5-star in. Yeah, I like what South Carolina is doing. They definitely have a tough schedule when you consider that they have to play Clemson every year and Georgia every year. That's rough. Like
Yeah.
that's nothing fun about that at all. But they did a remarkable job. Like they beat Clemson for the first time last year. They beat Tennessee, by the way, also last year. South Carolina has positive momentum. They really do. You don't want to talk about like a program's trajectory. South Carolina could easily use that and kind of propel them into future years. So yeah, I like South Carolina and I like the job that Beamer's doing there.
Yet another school that we have in the same slot. I also have them at 21. Everything you said, I just like there's a whole bunch of SEC teams right in this middle tier of their conference that it's sort of like pick your preference. But
Right.
South Carolina, it's no doubt that their trajectory looks good. Shane Beamer has brought an energy to that program that was not there before. Just definitely a different type of personality than, well, Will Muschamp. Not that he's
Oh,
not good at what he does, but
right.
Shane Beamer has been a different animal for them and like the trajectory of South Carolina.
Yeah. Okay. So for me at number 22, I will go with TCU as well. This is about
Okay.
where the slide needed to stop. Are they are they the number like 22 program? Maybe, maybe not. But do we have to put them there simply because they won a playoff game last
Right.
year? Yes, we do. Like at some point, that does have to matter because like the list of teams ahead of them that have not won playoff games, like that's like most of them.
Yeah.
So it's hard to win these playoff games, and they did that. So yeah, props to them. We'll have them there, and I don't know. Is it you? People want to talk about a 1 year wonder, and maybe not, but there's no question that Sonny Dykes has used. He's parlayed that into a like some recruiting momentum as well as transfers coming in that he was not going to get otherwise. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no doubt that that is a program that whose trajectory is very much pointed up right now.
Mm-hmm. My next team is North Carolina. It's a little scary for me because I would have liked
Hmm.
to see them be a little bit better the last couple years, considering
Yeah.
the way they had been recruiting under Mac Brown. They do still have Drake May, probably the number 2 quarterback in the country.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I think maybe this is kind of down to 3 things. Mac Brown is a pretty good coach. Drake May is a really good quarterback. And the level of talent on their roster is actually really good. Like it's not national championship contender,
Yeah.
but it's good. It's better than you would expect from North Carolina.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I have them just a little bit lower, but I do have Nebraska. This is at number
Ooh.
23. Love the hire of Matt Rule. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's done a great job kind of everywhere he's went. And yeah, even his stint in the NFL, I think a lot of his players would have felt that it could have even been better. Like maybe he got a little bit of an unfair shake there. And there's no doubt that he's a really good college coach. So How it works out with Dylan Raiola, like that's to be determined, but there's no question that like Raiola's recruitment, but the number one overall quarterback for this next year's recruiting class, by the way, Dylan Raiola, it's pretty much between Nebraska and Georgia. Like it's like that one's it's pretty consensus at this point. And for them just to have a hat at the table, I think shows how far they've come in a short amount of time and the job that he's doing there. A lot of that is because is it like his dad that's on staff at Nebraska that also helps a lot. But is his dad or his uncle? I forget.
I think it's his uncle. I've heard several different. I think I've actually heard people admit that they have messed it up before. So I'm not sure which way they messed it up. I think his dad is Dominic, who's the longtime NFL center, and his uncle is the guy on their staff. If I have it right.
Either way, they have used that to get a foot in the door with the number one overall quarterback who decommitted from Ohio State. So it's props to them. I think Nebraska will I think them in Wisconsin will be turning around what was right now really a bad Big Ten West. And now you mentioned that may not be around for much longer, but it's not a very, like there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of wins that are available right now in the Big Ten West. I think Nebraska will turn around quite quickly.
Yeah, I didn't have them in my top 25. Probably would have had them down around 35, honestly. But like we said, I mean, that's all pretty close. I just want to see a little bit more on the field from them. Like I want to see some proof of concept from Matt Rule before I would consider having them that high, especially considering that the talent level of the roster is not all that good.
Sure.
My number 23 team is Kentucky. Maybe the polar opposite of Nebraska. Just always feel like what you're getting with Kentucky to some extent. Now, last year it was a bit disappointing. The offensive line was not good like it used to always be.
Right.
We'll see if they can turn it around. If they have another year like they did last year, they might not be ranked anymore. But hey, they're upgrading from Will Levis to Devin Leary, so we'll see what happens with Kentucky.
Low-hanging fruit. We're not getting into that. No, I refuse to comment. My number 24 team is UCLA. I think Chip Kelly's doing a really good job out there. Brought a 5-star quarterback in, Dante Moore.
Yeah.
They won a lot of games last year. Like UCLA was just sneaky good. And maybe it wasn't even sneaky. Like maybe they were just good. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think they're definitely a program that's worth like being kind of in this area. Like I wouldn't put them much lower. I think there's a lot of value with just like Kelly's mindset. I think the experience that he brings there can be a little bit like it's just invaluable. Like he's just one of a kind. Like there's not just guys like him everywhere. I think he fits well at UCLA. Kind of gets to take a back seat to Lincoln Riley. Doesn't have to be rah-rah out in the media or anything. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of like he's like just sneaky good. Like that's what UCLA is right now. They're just sneaky good.
Yeah, I have him just outside of my top 25. Don't hate that at all. Dante Moore is he might be my pick to be the best quarterback in this loaded quarterback class. Like I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah, so, I agree.
Yeah. My number 24 team is Kentucky's twin in the Big Ten, Iowa. Ooh. Basically the same program.
Yes.
This hurts so much. Brian Ferentz is still employed by the Iowa Hawkeyes as their offensive coordinator.
I know.
If it wasn't for that, like they could legitimately be a top 16, 17 program, I really think. But yeah, here they are. I have them at 24.
Lot to say there. I'm not gonna say it. Can the defense possibly score enough points so that Brian can keep his job? That's a great question. I was really good. They really are. I was a good football team whose offense is just so bad. Their offense is so bad that it makes that you question putting them up there in the top 25, or I am at least, because they can't score points. Like the whole point of this sport is to score more points than your opponent. And when your offense just doesn't do that, it's very difficult to win games. It just makes it very, very hard. I'm still going to go with Iowa at 25. It was either them or North Carolina. And it was like, who do I dislike the most? They're like, yeah, by the way, North Carolina is kind of the other way. Like they can score a ton, but can't stop anybody.
Right.
I'm okay with Iowa there. I'd like to think that the offense will take a step forward, even if it's just a slight step this next year. Mm-hmm. Because there's no doubt that they have the fundamentals down. They have a really good defense. Like they tackle very well. like they don't really miss coverages that much. Like they really don't. They have a great defense. Yeah, we'll go with Iowa at 25 a little bit begrudgingly because I don't know who else to put ahead of them.
Cade McNamara is going to feel like Patrick Mahomes to them, like to those Iowa fans. Like seriously.
Is he or are they going to kind of make him look pedestrian? Like that was where I went with it. Maybe
pedestrian would be a huge improvement.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
All right, my last team in this list is Ole Miss. I had them at 25. Again, like there was a number of other teams I could have picked, but I went with Ole Miss. Just kind of trust Lane Kiffin, trust their offense to be good. Yeah, not a whole lot more to say about it than that.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just kind of recap these lists. Ashton, your top 25 programs in college football right now. Power rankings: Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Clemson, LSU, Oklahoma, Oregon, Notre Dame, Penn State, USC, Texas, Florida, Miami, Tennessee, Florida State, Washington, Wisconsin, Utah, South Carolina, TCU, Nebraska, UCLA, and Iowa. My 25, pretty different, but we have a lot of similarities as well. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Michigan, LSU, USC, Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Florida State, Florida, Washington, Utah, Wisconsin, TCU, South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, Iowa, and Ole Miss. Any thoughts? Any surprises? Or yeah.
No, not really. I think I had A&M and Miami very, very high. I'm buying low. Their stock is at an all-time low, and I am buying low. Like that is me. So I'm also maybe buying a little bit low on Florida. I think Florida could be kind of sneaky this year. And I'm a little bit out on North Carolina. Like I think maybe that's kind of where I left it. I'm a little out on them. And does it turn around for them? Maybe. Was the lack of defense concerning? Absolutely. Like absolutely. There's really good programs that we left off completely. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like you have to be really good in college football to be in the top 25. And I think like I don't think that's mentioned enough is the amount of really good programs that aren't even in there because there's just so many. So that's why, I left North Carolina off for that reason. What about you?
Yeah, I don't know if there was a ton of like huge surprises. I was a little surprised you went as high as you did on A&M. Sure. I get it. Like I was the same last year.
Yep.
But yeah, you mentioned like there's so many programs down like just below. Like none of us mentioned Auburn or Mississippi State or Arkansas. Like like they could all three be in both of our lists next year. Like depending on what this next year looks like. But yeah. All right. It's been a long episode. We should wrap this up. Thanks everybody for listening. In the comments, like tell us how incredibly wrong we are, even though we know that we are both perfectly accurate in our lists.
Correct.
Even though they're not the same, they are both perfectly accurate, and you cannot tell me otherwise. So there you go. Although I encourage you to try. Thanks for listening. We really do appreciate the feedback we get on these shows, and appreciate that. Maybe some of you are still listening an hour and a half into this, and so you are our biggest fans, and we appreciate you so much. Have a great week, and messed that up. God bless you all. Clearly, it's been a long episode.